Good morning and welcome to the Hobby Breakfast Show. I'm OT and I'm joined today by Onod.
Hello.
And the Mayor.
That's me. I'd almost forgotten.
Yeah, no, I forgot my name as well. And today we're not going to be intentionally aggravating people, but that may be a happy byproduct of what we talk about today. But essentially, we're just going to address sort of the upcoming releases and why they might not actually, inverted commas, save MESBG. And yeah, we're just going to talk through some quite general stuff today. And I think also think about kind of the journey that MESBG has been on in terms of the way you build armies and perhaps why people aren't necessarily that happy with it at the moment.
Yeah.
So, in the beginning, there was nothing. MESBG didn't initially exist, and then J. Clare descended from.
He forged the new rulebook in the mountain of GW.
Of Nottingham, and
like how we're simultaneously going too far back, but also getting it wrong.
MESBG, he did have a hand in.
MESBG, I think, was Adam Troke initially, wasn't it? And then J. Clare
hence MESBG as opposed to whatever.
Anyway, can we just cut this?
But essentially, when it began, if we think about like the options you had for list building, basically you could take any combination of units you wanted to. There was like no restrictions at all. And basically the player was fully trusted with kind of the thematic, like all of the thematic options. And the rules were kind of designed in a way that implied you would always do good versus evil, but there was nothing saying you had to.
Yeah. Just the trust in the player.
And because people are trustworthy, that meant that competitive players brought goblins with spears behind Uruk-hai.
Yep.
Because that's what happens when you give rules.
That's what happens in the movies, isn't it?
Yeah.
I remember that bit.
It's interesting, isn't it, how like maybe some people have a negative viewpoint on competitive players now, but since the game has existed, it's always been something that people try and like abuse the angles you can take in the game. Like,
I think competitive players always look to min-max. It's just more people talk about competitive stuff now than they used to. That's the difference, isn't it? It's like more attention gets given to it, but yeah.
And then like gradually as time moved on, as like more expansions got released and more units were released, I think it got pretty clear that there was a need to like restrict things essentially. So there was the alliance matrix that came in and the need to actually like have a hero leading a warband, because that didn't used to be a thing you had to do. Which maybe help. I don't know if that was done for balance reasons. I don't know if that's an oversimplification.
I think so.
It helps balance.
Yeah, I think it was done just to prevent people in the Lord of the Rings rule system just spamming infantry. And so it brought that in. It definitely changed the dynamic of the game, and it made the named heroes more enticing, I guess, and more of them relevant. So yeah.
When did like strike and things like that came in? I'm not that sharp on
Hobbit's version of the rules.
And they weren't initially restricted to just named heroes, were they? You could like strike with captains and things.
Yeah. So I think in the Hobbit, it went back to a system where actually cheap heroes became better again. Because why pay 200 points for Aragorn when your orc captain could beat him in fight value, and you can have like 5 orc captains and just spam them. So yeah, then they restricted it, of course.
Yeah. But even with the restrictions, like my memory of building lists, especially in last edition, was that there weren't, an infinite number of options, but there were so many like different flavors. But not just, overall in the entire game. It was also within a specific faction. Like you could run Gondor as just pure Gondor, or you could ally with Rohan, and there were loads of options for like yellow alliances and things like that. And within all of those, I think there was so much nuance in terms of like what you wanted your list to do. And I think it's interesting. We'll talk about like the theme stuff maybe more later, but when it was just in the hands of the players, I don't think it ever felt like it was that problematic. And especially, obviously, they had to bring in the changes where, like, red alliances weren't allowed at tournaments. But once that change was made, it felt like it was okay.
Yeah, and I guess in terms of what this video is really about, is talking about the new edition and why introducing more lists isn't going to solve the problems that people are finding, if they are finding them with the new edition. I guess there's a debate as to whether that is actually a thing.
Maybe we should talk about what the perceived problems are first.
Yeah.
I mean, like, my perspective on this is, I think we've moved from the last edition where, again, it's not an infinite number, but it is a huge number and variety of options and different ways you could flavor each faction. And now, even though we have, I think it's about 90, I think we have 68 or so existing lists. And then I think when the third book comes out, we'll move up to about 95. So there are still a pretty broad variety. And I think in a lot of games, it would be, considered quite a big variety. But there has been such a large reduction in the number of options. And I think for me, it's definitely killed a huge amount of, I say joy, that's maybe an exaggeration, but of the fun of list building, because you can't really discover new things anymore. The list I was running at the end of last edition was a combination of Eagles and Thorin's Company, and I never ran into a mirror match, whereas at most tournaments it's pretty likely you're going to run into some kind of mirror match. Or
I guess the complaint that most people have is when I pick a list, I'm not really building my own army. It's like you pick a list and then it's pretty clear what the army is. I guess the interesting thing to discuss would be is take your example of Thorin's Company and Eagles. You can still run that. You can take Eagles in Thorin's Company. Is this a perceived problem because people can't open up their app and, Tabletop Admiral, they can't just add all of the stuff they want and they feel like they're being railroaded? Or is this an actual problem? Is there an actual limitation to list building? Yes, obviously without the alliances. That's pretty clear. But are there actually enough lists which cover that? I think that's an interesting thing. Is this more of a mental perception from people rather than an actual thing? And there's not really a way of answering that, but
I mean, Go on,
Eagles has become a bit of a scapegoat, right? But I think also, there are other problematic armies like Dale and Urukai and things like that. And I don't know. I just, maybe as we've maybe hinted at earlier in previous videos, with the advent of, competitive YouTube channels and blogs and all these things, people are just being even more compressed into a small variety of lists. And we just hear more from the competitive and the tournament scene. So maybe, as you're saying, it's just a perceived thing rather than... Because I highly doubt anyone's run all the lists.
I think that is a valid criticism, though, in terms of that hyper niche community of, because you're limited in your options and some lists are very clearly better than others.
Yeah.
You are starting to maybe see a game which is going to run into a lack of variety. And then it becomes a question of, well, can new scenarios fix that? And I think they can to an extent, but I don't think that...
I think they'll help, but they'll never give back the freedom that one had in the list building before.
I think that it's still fundamentally a problem of... it's funny, I was actually watching our initial video we did discussing this, and this was something that Mayor said, some lists just can't take a banner. And I know that plenty of people have pointed this out as a really common thing that people now talk about. But it's just sort of those lists, no matter how many new scenarios you bring out, they are going to be at a disadvantage for a percentage of the scenarios. And so gradually, if you are constantly focusing on trying to find better and better lists, you are eventually just going to rule those lists out. Unless they're like Eagles and they just win because they're better.
And I suppose also with the reduction in options in list building, it's harder to tailor your lists it's harder to like pick a faction and then make that faction better against something, because you just have fewer options to counter eagles, for instance. Like, there will just be some lists that literally cannot take the tools to deal with an eagles list, for instance, in a competitive situation. And so maybe like having that taken away just feels bad, because it's harder to run like maybe your favorite faction that you used to really enjoy playing.
Yes, Isengard's an example where it's so broken up now that I mean, I just loved being able to take, like you said earlier, what I wanted before and try and be creative with the vast amounts of units that I could take. And now it's very prescribed. There's a lot less freedom in doing what you want. And I genuinely think that that's probably taken away a lot of the fun. And I don't think adding more lists and more scenarios will necessarily fix that, but they'll help the enjoyment overall in the game, is my opinion.
Yeah, I think losing like a lot of the theory crafting is also something which harms the game, because I know this is something that OT you said like a month ago when we were playing Divinity, when we were not recording. You were just like, I never open up like a list building app anymore. Like it's not something that you like when you're sitting on like the bus or whatever. You find yourself, rather than opening up BBC Sport or whatever, you're opening up Tabletop Admirals, build like a hypothetical list, which you maybe never going to run, but you're just doing that out of interest. I haven't opened up the SBG Tabletop Admiral in like months now, because once I looked what the lists were when the edition came out, it's like, oh well, that's how I can run the models I have now.
Star Wars Legion's quite an interesting comparison to that.
Yeah,
I find myself on there all the time making random lists.
But again, I think that's because in Legion, the restrictions are actually quite small. Like, you can, within a faction, once you got, your core and your commander, you can pretty much do whatever you want. And I think that even though there's a limited number of like factions you can put things in, you just have so many options within that, and you can kind of tailor it to be whatever you want it to be. And yeah, I think one of the main things I actually did, and my interactions with SBG, were like list building on Tabletop Admiral. I do like quite a lot, and I think definitely my approach was sometimes like, it's a bit like a puzzle, and you just want to try and work out, which bits of a faction like fit together at different points levels, and now it's pretty dull because it is just so restricted. And as you say, it's kind of like almost like, it's not a pre-built list, but there are often
itself.
yeah.
Like Ugly Scouts. I mean, it is literally a case of, are you taking spears on your orcs, and if so, are you having any with shields or two-handed weapons? And that's pretty much it. You max the bows. You take Uglug. You take Grishnak, and then you just take captains in a ratio. Like that's literally it.
I think it's interesting because another game that Games Workshop does, which has more or less removed list building, is Kill Team. And I think that
true.
But
you can easily collect enough of those that it's almost not a problem.
That's what I was going to say. It only really works for a game like Kill Team because you know that you are going to get 8 new kill teams every year, and you only have to buy 10 models. So it works in a game like that because you are picking up constantly new armies, and you don't mind that you don't get to pick exactly the model you have. Although I would actually say that I lost interest in Kill Team once the list building bit was gone. But like, if you're there for the gameplay, it's okay because it doesn't become stale, because you can constantly go with different things. I do wonder whether gameplay wise, does it become a bit more stale now? It's more difficult to switch between armies, or do people go the other route and say, well, my Rohan collection, I can now play 10 Legendary Legions or whatever the new term for this army list, I guess. And
just army list,
and actually that is more variety. So it's an interesting one. I almost feel like people who were used to the list building freedom we are going to always perceive it as being better in the past. And I don't know whether that's actually true, though. Because it's interesting, because we had like a comment on the last video of a guy who just started this edition going, oh, actually, I found it way easier because I just pick a list and there you go. And I don't have to like it's not as confusing, which obviously, like, for me as an experienced player, I'm like, well, it was much easier last edition because I didn't have to remember like a gazillion special rules for every army. But I can kind of see, like, for somebody coming in who's not been used to it, that actually maybe it does just feel more streamlined. Yeah, it's interesting though with like who's playing the game though.
Yeah.
Are we just gonna end up with the core of what had been the MESBG community being a kind of like increasingly tournament driven scene? Is that dying because tournaments are not getting the numbers that they were? They're not selling tickets as quickly. I don't know.
A lot of them are.
Oh no, they're still filling the numbers, but it's. I have read like people saying like when we did these tournaments 2 years ago, it sold out in like 2 minutes,
right?
And we've still got 5 tickets left a week before the tournament, sort of thing. Like, you are getting numbers, but you're not attracting new people. You are just getting the same returning people again and again and again. So it's almost like it's plateaued numbers wise.
And I think it's interesting because by literally restricting the number of lists that are available, it does make it easier for Games Workshop to balance the competitive scene.
I'm not convinced by this argument.
But well, as in, because literally there are fewer options, I think it gives them more opportunity to balance it.
I think we had this conversation when we first saw what the changes are. I think it's easier to balance a combination of profiles than it is to balance arbitrary special rules you designate to a faction. I think it's really difficult to take a faction who has 8 special rules and tweak that to the point where it feels quote unquote balanced. Whilst I think if you're saying you can have this combination of profiles and there's no special rules, I think that's easier.
But they've now attached the special rules to the profiles.
No, but like every army has loads of special rules.
I mean, some of them don't have that many. I think like it was their thing on Warhammer Community, wasn't it? Where they were like, basically, the more variety you have in the list, the fewer special rules you'll have.
I'm not convinced that it's easier to balance. Take, for example, the banner problem. Like, that's just a fundamental thing that you now can't balance. If you're going to write scenarios that need banners, you now can't balance that. And if
they should just take that out of the scenario points.
Well, yeah, but they're not going to.
But that would be a very easy way of fixing it.
Sure, but do you see what I mean? Like, how do you quantify now giving an army, if you roll a 6, then you deal an automatic wound? How the fuck do you balance that? Because you can't really.
I mean, you kind of hope they would do it by play testing it and seeing how powerful it was, and then you would get an idea of where the different armies fit in.
There is no way that they have play tested 90 plus lists.
True. But I think it's interesting with the Eagles stuff right now. I don't know. Like, I mean, maybe with the new scenarios, Eagles become less good or something. But I feel like they could tone down Guaihe's like Screech rule, for instance, and then that would be an easier way to make Eagles less oppressive.
But then they'll become shit. Like, there won't be a happy medium with the way that they've built the army list. Your army is either going to be the shit or literal shit. Like, you won't be able to get everyone to sit happily. Because, say, for example, you take Guaihe's Screech. What's the most obvious nerf? They reduce it to 3 inches, like they did with Wrath of Bruinen.
Yeah, the banner,
and the army's fucked.
Yeah,
like they won't be able to find a middle ground unless they start doing bullshit like, oh, it's 5.5 inches. then it just dilutes the game. It becomes too much bullshit.
I mean, the other option is that they do more frequent balance updates on the smaller number of list options that now exist, and then there's like more variation in when like some lists are good at the start of the year and then become less good later on. I know that's not traditionally how it's done with MESBG, but if they are like, if they're doing these sort of smaller number of lists for whatever reason they've chosen, it might be easier to balance it that way.
I think it'd be interesting just as an experiment, and I don't know whether competitive people would actually enjoy this. Just not changing things and seeing whether if you have 90 plus available lists, can a natural meta form rather than an imposed meta?
Yeah.
Like, will Eagles drop off because people start bringing lists to counter them? And then those become the best lists. And then can you bring lists which counter those? Like, and allowing that more natural, organic thing to do. But I think the problem with that is that there are fundamentally quite a lot of lists which just won't ever make it.
But also, like, that was the case in the old edition as well, right? Like, I think this isn't a new, but inverted commas, problem. It's just that maybe because there were fewer options, people don't feel like they're as able to build something that's good against a list.
Because I guess the problem is like, let's take Isengard for an example, because it's a nice, easy one, because it has lots of variety, or, did. If Eagles were a problem for Mare in the old edition, you would have loads of tools to solve that problem, because you would say, right, I could run a list with Saruman and a mix. I could run a siege engine list. I could run
Saruman with bomb would be nice, wouldn't it?
Uglux list. Yeah. So like you would be able to like mix around, whilst now it's not options, it's Eagles are oppressive. I either run Uglux Scouts or I run this list. It's like the options now are X's problem, so I need to pick the best of these lists. You don't have the flexibility to say, actually, maybe a balance of stuff in a generic list is the better route. And I think that's why it feels to people more boring. Yeah, it's like the answers have been sold for you. Like there's no
X
puzzle.
beats Y.
Exactly. It's more rock, paper, scissors, which is literally the thing that you said after your first tour. That's the game feels more like rock, paper, scissors than it used to. And obviously not literally because you're rolling dice, but metaphorically it feels more like that.
There's some variance involved.
Yeah. Scissors
Sometimes
beats
someone brings
paper
a gun.
90% of the time. You have to roll a d6 on a 6. Scissors beat paper. No, paper beats scissors.
And then I guess another thing I wanted to think about is like this idea of like making these lists thematic. And I think it was it in the Warhammer community post where like there were armies that did not fully represent the world of Middle Earth, and something that we have tackled in the new edition. And I just personally, I didn't ever feel like that was a problem, especially that the new list building doesn't allow for like the what if thing. And I think in some ways, in trying to make the lists feel more thematic, they've taken away some of the other thematic options that people were interested in. So I don't actually know if making all lists thematic has made the game feel more thematic.
I actually have so many thoughts on this. I think that it's probably a video in its own right.
Okay. Well, you can say them all and then I can cut out them sort of as I choose to construct the narrative I want to hear.
I think in brief, they have made a game where your army, when it's on its own, feels more thematic, but when it's part of a game, it feels less thematic.
Oh, he's cooking something there. Okay, interesting.
But I genuinely think that I have to say on it, if it start going, be like a 30-minute video on its own.
Okay. Well, maybe we'll release that on the second channel.
I might genuinely record But if
No, just put it on this channel.
Yeah.
Yeah, the second channel's fucking
This
dead.
channel's empty. Like fucking, it's just dying for content.
The second channel's just OT's meme.
So one of the points I wanted to touch on, like an army being thematic, is it doesn't fucking matter if an army is thematic if you don't play it in a thematic way, because then the game doesn't feel thematic. So what is the point of making these list building restrictions thematic if you're then going to play it like a try-hardy prick? And
I think you said thematic
That's a really good point.
there.
So the way I thought about this, and the reason why I'm so triggered, is I remembered the scouring game, the last scouring scenario, where those were two of the most thematic armies I've ever played on the board with.
Played them very.
I literally wanted to, like, I was staying at Ollod's house, and I would have like bludgeoned him to death if I'd been allowed. There would have been any consequences. Like, so I don't understand this idea that I need to have models that make sense to go together if you're using them to play in a competitive way.
I think this is a wider problem, and this is probably going to ruffle feathers, but I think this is a wider problem, not just with the MESBG community, but sometimes with wargamers.
40k community.
Yeah, fuck them. No, I think that people can sometimes confuse, as long as your list is like has the law tick, that therefore whatever happens it's thematic. But you are absolutely correct. Like what this change has done is it's basically legitimized this MESBG nonsense, which I think the community has always tried to, soothe their feelings with. That as long as my list is something that could have happened, I can construct the most bullshit list and play in the most like scummy way. And like, fine, if you're at a tournament, like fine, like I don't really care, like, because that's not something that I'm going to engage with in my games. And I think that people pretty quickly find out if they want to go to a tournament or not. And if you want to go to a more casual tournament, fine. I think this is up to the TO to advertise it more casual and to rein in players if that's not what they're there for, which I think again is a problem with the GBHL, that it incentivizes people to play like arseholes because they want the points. But anyway, I've gone off topic again.
So much of this is going to get cut.
Yeah, no, it's completely
it's just going to be a 5-minute video.
It's completely fair. I slightly lost where I was going with it, to be honest. But yeah, people like. I think that it should have just been a case of, rather than forcing people to take what a small group of people at Games Workshop think is a thematic list, so that everyone is forced to take the same kind of list, and then they are just playing the most arseholey list in OT's words. Like,
did I say that?
I think so. You might have called them twats.
I think you called them pricks.
Pricks.
It might have been cut, so...
Okay, well, I'm going to just keep referring to it in your words, just so that it's impossible to take it out of context.
Done for libel.
But, like, I think in OT's words, these pricks... like, it's fine if you want to play like that, because... like, as long as you're playing with other people. So these army restrictions are pointless.
Yeah.
Because if you wanted to play thematically...
you
built a list that was thematic anyway.
Yeah.
If you wanted to play in a not thematic way, you were probably playing with other people who didn't want to play in a thematic way either. And if you were one of those people who wanted to play a thematic army but win, then you probably quite enjoyed the challenge of playing some optimal and then playing it in OT's words, a prickish manner, so that you could win, right? So like you've actually ruined what everyone was doing and enjoying by forcing this on them. But I get that equally some people like having a special horse for each hero that they own. Like, some people do enjoy that. I fully appreciate that some people love that. I just think that it's a bit like, I don't know, it just feels like an odd addition. But I think that is purely just because we are used to the previous editions.
And I think it's interesting, like, looking at how the restrictions have changed over time. Basically, more and more agency has been taken away from the players over time in terms of like the options available to you. And I think people maybe didn't realize what they had in previous editions in terms of the flexibility and how much trust was given to players to, like, you know, kind of do your own thing. And I don't know, it just feels a bit silly that people who've been playing the game for ages now have this kind of spoon fed to them by this new edition.
Honestly, my worst experiences at tournaments have always been against Legendary Legions.
And now it's just Legendary Legion.
Literally, like,
yeah.
I was quite a big fan of, like, Legendary Legions. I don't know if I ever really ran any of the good ones. I suppose I ran Helm once, didn't I?
Yeah,
but I was
but you hated it.
And I hated
I
it.
wouldn't even say that was really up there, to be honest.
But, like, Bjornings when they were good, Dragon Emperor, like, these were all Legendary Legions, and they were unfun because they just had a lot of nonsense that other lists didn't have, which made them feel tedious to play against.
Yeah.
It was like you weren't playing MESBG, you were playing How to Beat Bjornings the game. It's like, right, I've got to do a load of stuff that I wouldn't do in a regular game of MESBG because this list is not like a normal MESBG list.
Yeah.
Anyway, yeah, I'm not really. I'm not really sure we're talking about. I think we're just.
No, I'm not really sure what this. What is this? What are we?
I think we're just ranting.
Yeah, we haven't really followed your nice structured format.
No. I didn't spend ages on these slides, but I did put some thought into these slides, and then, to be honest, I think we've gone in a more interesting direction overall. But
we could go through them and sort of.
You can pull it in where you want. Like, we have in quite a loose way, but I don't know.
You've got some specific stuff on there, though.
Yeah, I think the one thing I did want to pick up on before we draw this to a close is, I think one of the things that got people excited early on were kind of the gimmicky special rules that were attached to each of these armies. I think that was a lot of, like, you saw these initial things. It was like, wow, he can do this now, or this model can do this now. But I think that was just like such a short-term thing, and I think it was what Arnold said earlier in the video. Like, as soon as you scrolled through and had a look at all of them, that's kind of like the excitement gone. And I think from the way, like, GW have phrased some of, like, the stuff they put on Warhammer Community, those special rules were meant to kind of make up for, taking this list building stuff away. And I think it just feels like such a band-aid short-term solution. And I'm just worried that, people are viewing the Third Army book in a similar way. Like, it will bring in these new lists with these new profiles. They'll have all these new rules, and there'll be like a brief kick of, like, maybe a month or two where people are like, oh, the game's back, look at all this cool new stuff. And then we just get straight back to where we are right now.
Yeah. I do just sort of, as I feel like we're meandering towards a point of closure, I do just want to sort of add that, like, I think it's interesting when you look at people who don't play MESBG, or at least not in any way that they keep up with it, have almost been laughing at the start of this new edition, which possibly might change direction with the new books. Although, as I think the message of this video is kind of like, it is really just adding a load of army lists going to actually solve any of these problems we're talking about? Probably not. Is adding a load of scenarios going to add any sort of these problems? It'll make it a better experience if you're a competitive player, but you've still got those fundamental issues. Like, people are, like, laughing at situations like that picture that came out of that tournament, which had all those eagle lists. I've seen multiple people now online, like, out of context, talking about that, being like, lol, isn't this funny? Games Workshop fucking can't balance a game. And it's like, oh, that's not a great look for SBG, especially when the community, like, has this idealized vision of this being, like, the best game that Games Workshop's ever made, and it's really well balanced. And, like, those are things which I would, like, probably say aren't necessarily untrue, but it's not great that, like, the public image of the game is lol, eagle spam, ha 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 ha.
I think the really interesting thing is the core mechanics of the game have barely changed. Like,
whoa. Have you not been reading all the posts on Facebook about people congratulating Games Workshop on what a great addition the intelligence stat was?
Yeah, okay.
Everyone loves it.
Okay, well, I tell you what, if the new book brings in the charisma stat, that will just be.
Oh my goodness, yes.
Can you imagine the fucking scene?
You roll it once, one time, and there's an entire stat for it.
Yeah, and it has no impact on the game. But as I was, I've lost my fucking train of thought now.
Sorry, I had to get the dig in about intelligence.
But fundamentally, the mechanics of the game are the same. Like it's still similar, but I'm just amazed by like how different the narrative has become so quickly. And you know, there were people in the community who were asking for this style of list building. Like
people always hate everything. Is I think the message. You will never make everyone happy.
Yeah. I just hope it doesn't cause like the wider community of players to reduce, because I think
it's already happened, 100%.
But I just don't know how you measure that. Like it obviously I doubt we'll get any like hard data on it, and there's not many ways to ascertain that. But
I think just in terms of like the realities, new editions are always able to jump off a game because they just come to the conclusion that they're not going to reinvest in all the rule books, right? Because the Games Workshop game requires that level of investment.
Yeah.
And how many people are joining the game off the back of a movie that wasn't received that well, and not that many people saw? Like, if you went and saw that movie and you enjoyed it, you'd already play Middle-earth.
Yeah.
So I think that the player base probably is either plateaued or shrinking. Doesn't necessarily mean that that's going to affect like tournament numbers or affect people's enjoyment, or even noticeably change Games Workshop sales. But I imagine that less people are playing it now than were playing that last edition.
Well, at least everyone will be able to use all their armies soon.
Yeah,
mostly.
unless
apart from the ones that got discontinued.
Yeah, I was about to say yeah.
Get correct.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It'll be the only one I'm realistically going to be interested in is probably Khazad-dûm, and it's a bit wild. Only one of 26 is going to be interesting.
Guarantee they will be dog shite.
I mean, I don't want them to be competitively good. I just want them to have something that makes me go like, that might be fun to play.
I can guarantee that they will be neither competitively good or fun to play.
I mean, wars are notoriously sort of one-dimensional, aren't they? And slow and not particularly exciting. So
maybe they'll give them cavalry.
It's just the way the universe works. It'll be shit.
Well, yeah. I mean, the thing is, like, as a result of me not having any interest in any of the armies really in this edition, I haven't bought any of the books, and so I'm actually one of the players that you've kind of highlighted that have just like. I bought a lot of stuff in last edition, like a lot of stuff, and now just
all your stuff, pretty much.
Yeah, kind of wild actually.
Now you're buying all the Star Wars Legion stuff instead.
Yeah, hoovering up everyone else's unwanted stuff on eBay.
And soon you'll be the only man in the UK playing Star Wars Legion.
I'll continue my habit of joining games just before they die. Be like the Grim Reaper.
You go to a tournament signals the game's in decline.
Oh no, OT's at a 40k tournament. Fucking.
It's over, guys.
We had a good run.
Time to bail to AOS.
Yes. Or Warhammer Fantasy.
Yes. Warhammer the Old World.
Coming soon.
Get relevant.
You two are interested in that, aren't you?
I've still got a fucking army from about 8 years ago.
Maybe we should do a bat rap on. You could do a bat rap on the channel.
Warhammer the Old World bat rap.
Oh well, I've got circular bases. You see.
Oh, no dice then.
From Sigmar, I've only kept it because I thought all this sort of vampires and zombies and stuff would be quite useful if we did any tabletop roleplay stuff or D&D. And I just think they're cool. I just like having them.
There you go. You can buy the new versions now that they've just released this weekend.
Oh, please no.
No, I think you should.
I don't need new models. I've already bought a bunch of new Star Wars Legion stuff that I haven't told anyone about yet because I want to paint them and put them on the table before anyone says, "Oh, I can't believe you bought that. What the fuck are you doing?"
Except you just told us.
Except I'm sorry, but you don't know what it is. So
I'm leaving that in. He's bought eyeballs.
I bought the models. Yeah.
Shadow Collective.
It's not
No,
shadow
Shadow
collected.
Collected.
No one plays.
There's only
Right.
5 possible lists it could be, so it's not that much of a
Well,
surprise.
it's
I haven't
true.
bought. Well, in fairness, I do actually have all of the lists apart from Rebels. So,
Jesus
but I haven't
Christ.
just started collecting Rebels. Don't worry.
Oh my god.
I'm main CIS. What can I say?
Are we trying to draw any kind of conclusions from this, or are we just going to cut it?
I don't really know what the conclusion is. The conclusion is either everyone is getting too excited or we're being too pessimistic. Like somewhere in between, right?
Yeah. Although we do have a good record of being right on this kind of shit, so actually maybe
by being pessimistic.
Yeah, by being by being realistic. I think.
I think you're totally right. The third army book isn't actually going to change anything because it's just more of the same. I think match play guides may appease the crowd who are vocally talking about competitive stuff.
Yeah.
Whether or not Games Workshop are able to release them in a quick enough time frame, though, that they make up the ground they've lost. Because I think really one of the things that's damaging the competitive scene is the expectation of a lot of players that they should be getting stuff now.
Yeah.
And then a lot of people in the community going, nah, it's all right, just wait. And always the community fighting each other.
Yeah. Yeah.
That's not good, is it? It's like
it is. I mean, I'm not hopping on the bandwagon of they should release it now because we need a match play guide, but it is a bit crazy that they refuse to confirm any kind of timeline. Like the coming months is technically accurate, but it doesn't mean anything. And I can I can empathize with people who, if you are a competitive player who spent loads of time getting good at the game and you don't feel like it's the kind of experience you want and you hope the match play guide will fix it, like these just crap announcements from Warhammer community, it would make it worse, if anything.
It really is such a them problem though, isn't it? Like, I haven't even fucking had enough time to play a game in the new edition yet. I don't give a fuck that there are more scenarios because I haven't played one of them. It's like a problem for about 300 people in the UK. And
okay, right, good.
Complaining. We're fucking complaining that Games Workshop haven't released a book in the last month.
Let's hope that doesn't timestamp the video, eh?
By the time this is released, they'll have been launched.
Oh dear!
Jesus Christ!
Yeah.
Cut that out.
Oh, for goodness' sake!
Too political.
Too political. But yeah, I'm glad Onod agrees with me, and I only want to hear opinions that agree with me in the comments. So
did I agree with you?
You did. You said I was valid. The third army book won't fit. Yeah.
Sorry, I forgot that's what this video was about.
Yeah, it's easy to forget. Oh goodness me. Cool. Right. Well, I'm not sure what this is, but I think that'll do.
Heavily edited, I think, is what this is.
Or just completely unedited.
Or just completely unedited.
Yeah,
it'll be one of the two.
We'll see. Maybe we'll do a members video of the unedited version with the political commentary and me calling out half of the competitive UK scene.
Members, lol.
It's just Hunsler.
If membership to this channel was free, we still wouldn't have any.
We would lose subscribers.
Yeah. Oh Christ.
Right. Well, yeah, put down in the comments your opinions. We seem to have become a bit of a magnet for people with grievances about MESBG recently. So if you feel like you want to talk to someone about your MESBG concerns, absolutely stick them down in the comments. We may not respond. Onod's been pretty hot on the responses, so maybe he will.
I feel like we're not being overly negative though.
No, I think we're being completely realistic. We're just people like to complain to us, and I find that quite wholesome.
I don't want to get grouped with the channels who just shit all over stuff that their audiences claim to enjoy all the time.
Yeah, I mean, we don't care enough to really.
Our channel is about this game. I think it's fairly self-evident that we care about the game. I think everyone can see that.
I mean, we've been playing it for what, 15 years now?
And we do hate ourselves. So.
It's a masochistic thing.
Oh Christ.
Cool. Well, like and subscribe, and I don't know when. I mean, do we need to get back on that painting the model review train? Don't we?
We do, yeah.
Review those sculpts
at some point.
Yeah. Although, given that the fucking video Onod did by himself got like 5 times the views that those do, maybe we're doing the wrong shit.
Honestly, it should just be me.
Yeah.
I think it's because when I have no one to bounce off of, I'm much less fucking down. When I'm on my own, I have to stick to the facts. I think I'm actually making like a reasonably tight video, whilst whenever I have someone to talk to, I'd start fucking talking about nuclear war.
Which may or may not have started at the time of this video's recording.
Oh, Jesus Christ.
Good. Well, bye.
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 Oh, Christ.
Crikey.
What a time to be alive.
Right, we're on.
Doing all
What's up, fuckers?
We're back.
Bitch.
We fucking put a gun to Onod's head and made him record last week, and this time the whole crew's back.
With the video no one demanded.
This
we wanted to make.
It turns out
one of us did.
It turns out that Onod only is what the people want.
Yeah, literally, just it's like watering down squash. It turns out people literally just want double concentrated squash.
That's all I'm saying.
They straight into their fucking eyeballs.
They want that fucking hard ginger shot. They don't want. They don't want this fucking weak ass tea that we serve at most of the time. They just want my salt.
They just want pure caffeine injected into their veins. Right, I'm probably going to cut that out, but you never know.
No, surely not.
Just leave this whole thing as a ramble, I reckon.